Do you know a company that is actively innovating in freight or disrupting the industry with its new approach? Nominate them to become a 2025 Freight Tech company, and they could be honored as one of the Freight Tech 100 or the Freight Tech 25. Past honorees include Amazon, FedEx, JB Hunt, Project 44, Tesla, and many more. Companies can nominate themselves or other industry leaders that are making waves in the freight marketplace.
Welcome back to another edition of Check Call. Don't forget to subscribe to Check Call the newsletter on FreightWaves.com if you haven't already. Today we welcome back the one and only Craig Lau, Director of Strategic Planning at A. Pyle. Welcome back to the show, Craig.
Thanks for having me, Mary.
So we kind of got your background last time you were on the show, but a cute little, let's call it a humble brag. A cute little humble brag that you guys have is that from the last time that we really talked to you, and I guess the last year, you guys have 100% retention in your brokerage this year. Well, congratulations. That's a really big feat. How did you guys, what's you don't have to give us the secret sauce, but like, how did you guys do that? Because that's a big accomplishment.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. As I joined Pyle and really started to understand the company culture, we began the relaunch plan for 2023, and looking into that, talking with shippers, talking with different people on brokers, turnover was one of the biggest challenges that everybody experienced. So we did a lot of research, and in that research, different things that came up were leadership, location, lack of career opportunities, external economic factors, and then just an overall lack of transparency. So our redesign, everything was involved with Pyle people being first. A lot of brokers out there focus on tech first or other areas. Everything was people. So our new location in Mechanicsburg was chosen because it has some of the best cost of living in the Pyle footprint. And a lot of people at different brokerages will leave simply because they can't afford to live there as they get further on in their career. The commute's pretty rough. So location has a huge part to do with it. And then we also redesign different jobs from the ground up to give career progression paths that everybody can do it based on their individual merits versus waiting for somebody else. And then I do have to say, I'm very proud of the leadership team that we've assembled, and they do a great job of working with everybody throughout the brokerage. So I think those are really the big factors.
So one of the things that ultimately come with this huge success of having all of these or having 100% retention is, you know, you have a spot for everyone. There's a place for everyone. Everybody feels like they kind of have a voice. How do you keep everyone, you know, motivated and engaged? Because that's like every day you have to keep people happy and willing to come back to keep that 100% retention. And like just what's your stuff for people happy and motivated?
That great question. I actually asked my team members because I figured their answers would be a lot better than me because they're the ones that are living and breathing it every single day. It comes back to the hiring process was really big for the team. And a nice comment was everybody seems to be somebody they want to work with. So you don't have individuals that are too high-strung or too self-centered along the way. So really making the team mold, that was big. Another one is Pyle actually feels human to some people, which for a company with 4,000 people, we're a large corporation, but they actually feel like what we're doing from an HR perspective, day in and day out coaching, that it's not just numbers based like so many large companies out there are, also that it feels smaller than it is. And that really starts from the top all the way down. Most of our executives have had conversations with everybody on the floor. And when you look at a company with 4,000 people, that we've got people that have been here anywhere from a year to 30 years, but they're all able to talk to a C-level team member at Pyle. That's huge. So everybody just feels really connected. And then the other thing goes down to just autonomy with allowing everyone on the team to make their own decisions.
That's got to be something that's really hard because, I've worked in small companies, large companies, and in those larger companies, it's really easy just to kind of feel like a number in a body, like, oh, I'm just here because, it pays the bills. And that's got to be hard to keep that engagement up and let people feel that, like, you are kind of part of a small company, but you're still part of a big company. Because I know that in those larger companies, it's easy to get lost in, those jargon of, we just want everybody to be in alignment and follow this roadmap and all of this. And then, we have all this HR red tape and other things, which, don't get me wrong, the HR red tape is important because nobody really wants to like get sued or have anything bad happen from an HR perspective. So like that's very important to have there, but also like that's kind of hard to balance the like you're in a corporate structure but we want you to feel like you can go out and do whatever you want. We want you to feel like, okay, you want to try something new today? Okay, let's try it. Let's see, like, what's the worst that can happen? It's very hard to balance that when you also are in that large corporate environment and, everyone is concerned about margin and bottom line, which is something that obviously we do need to be concerned about because that's obviously how you run a successful business. So how do you guys really balance that? Like, take a risk, take a chance, see what works for you, or if this process works for you, we love that. How do you balance that autonomy with kind of staying together as a team and really, making sure that you're not just a number in a giant business, in a giant company?
Everyone ultimately has goals. It's why we come to work, but those goals for the individuals roll up to their teams, which roll up to the division, which roll up to the enterprise. So everybody understands that they need to do their part. And as long as they're not cutting corners or taking risk that could potentially be negative to us as an organization, we encourage all of the creativity in the world. The great example of that is James, who joined Pile about a year and a half ago, had this idea in the fourth quarter, hey, I want to try to move a box truck. And that's something that Pile had not done through brokerage before. So we told him, okay, that's fine. Give it a shot. But if you don't get this thing covered, you're going to move it on a 53 and take the hit. So if you look at a price difference between a box truck and a 53, it can be pretty substantial. So he knew he had to get this thing covered. Fast forward, now we've got the majority of our Cradle to the Grave team is moving box trucks for customers. And we're going to hit over 100 box truck loads this month after moving our first one in Q4 of last year. And it's a product that's really just, it's really taking off for us. So that's a great example of we're giving people the ability to be creative as long as it's within, I would say, reasonable guidelines.
Like, obviously, you don't want to start Pile skydiving division, but... But that makes a lot of sense of like, hey, we have this potentially untapped market, this other thing that we could be doing. Let's just see what happens. And, if something went wrong on the box truck move, then it's one box truck move. Like it's not the end of the world. It's not great, but also you're also not known for being amazing box truck movers. So it's just kind of like, well, we took a chance. It didn't really work out. Maybe we lost a couple $100 on it. We just know not to do that again. But now you've been able to turn it into something wildly successful. And I absolutely love that. That is like the kind of goal setting and encouraging that I just love to see, And
we want to be entrepreneurial, but we also have that 100-year reputation to protect. So as we're entrepreneurial, there's usually some sort of safety net or just ability to cover things in the background that are done. So yeah, absolutely. And we're very, very happy on this because service levels on box truck right now are living up to that reputation that we work so hard to build in LTL as well as our other services.
That's like the ultimate win of like you started something new and you're able to grow it to where it actually lives up to your standard level of service that everyone can expect. And it's got to be just like a chef's kiss moment of like, we've done it. We've done it.
Absolutely.
So one of the big things that you mentioned is that, anyone, regardless of where they are in the organization, kind of has a path upward. So how did you guys really kind of establish that? And then have there been any like specific training or development programs you've put in place as a result of what people have been asking for?
We added a fair amount of experienced brokers onto the floor that are helping to coach and guide our people that are newer to the industry. But we really look at mistakes as training as well. And one example I'll give is if somebody misquotes a load or you get stuck on it, the behavior that you're teaching those individuals can really chart the course for how they're going to react later on in their career. And a lot of brokers will take a load that they get stuck on and they'll train somebody how to negotiate out of it with the customer or make up an excuse to pick up the following day. Versus if we're misquoting something, we're going to pick the load up and that broker is going to take the hit on their individual goals because it has to move and hit the service expectations. But we view that as training because every time that happens, okay, you've got to be accountable now and it's registering. So to me, hey, if you're misquoting something, that's a training experience. But the coaching that we're providing is look next time, make sure you're trying to cover the truck early. So that's been huge. One conference that I'm really excited about that I've got somebody going to is the Power of Dynamic Leadership. And that's being put together by Jim Brown and Jim Best in Texas in September. So Anna from our team is actually going to check that out. And, if it goes well, we'll probably see additional members in the future. But Jim Best was a mentor of mine. He was my boss starting back in 2008. And just the ability that he has to pass on information, I'm really looking forward to sending the team to that.
That has to be really exciting though, because not only is it like, you're able to send your team and learn, and they're able to kind of grow personally and professionally. That has to be kind of like a nice full circle moment that like everyone else gets to kind of experience what you had when you started working with them in 2008. Can be nice.
Absolutely.
I do appreciate though that you guys have taken that as the miscoding as a learning opportunity, because people make mistakes. You think you can make it. You think you can quote it at this. It's fine, but sometimes you eat a couple $100 and it sucks. But I like that you've taken it to that training opportunity, other than just like you did it wrong. Here's how you did it. And like sucks to suck, but it's more like no, this is other resources you can use to make sure you're not going to make this mistake in the future. And I really like that approach to it, because it's not just like you did it bad. It's like, nope, things happen. This is what we can do in the future to make sure it doesn't happen. Because that's not fun for anyone to kind of admit that they took a loss on something,
Yeah, I'd rather people get good at quoting versus getting good at making excuses and trying to sell out of bad situations.
And that also helps, because you don't want to it really makes you stop and think like, okay, do I want to take this load to make maybe $50 to $70 on it versus, okay, I know I could absolutely crush this load, so I'm going to put my resources into that, versus something I may or may not be able to cover. And it just means that like when you come to the table for those bids, you're bringing more accurate, and people know that it's going to get covered. Because I couldn't tell you how many times I've dealt with someone and they're like, oh yeah, it'll get covered. And then like 30% of the time they're like, just kidding, it didn't. Or like, oh, it'll get covered tomorrow, not when you actually needed it by. And that's very frustrating, and that's not and that over the time like wears down that reputation. So,
well, and I think a really good example that we saw on the floor earlier this week, we've got a regular lane that we've been moving for a customer for a couple months, goes every week. And, margins are really tight in the industry right now. A regular truck wasn't available, so we covered it at a pretty significant loss. And that broker is going to have to move 3 to 4 loads in that lane to make up for it. And he went to the customer and said, I am not asking for any money at all. We quoted it. We're covering it. But do you have any opportunities for me to pick up additional freight? Because this is what you mean to me. And the customer gave him several more loads to quote, because again, we're honoring that commitment. But if we're going to, if he's going to put his neck on the line and make that happen for the customer, we want them to know how much they mean to us. So that's going to end up being a pretty nice story if we pick up an extra lane or two.
So you guys have obviously crushed it. You unlocked the code. You guys have crushed employee retention. what are some of the most, on the other side of it, what are some of the most common mistakes that you're seeing companies lead that do cause this high turnover? And whether that's, your experience before or other things you've heard from professionals in the industry.
I think the over glamorization of hustle culture and brokerage is huge. And that's the way I grew up. I worked insane hours in my 20s and 30s, but not everybody is built that way and not everybody can withstand that. So hustle culture leads to a lot of burnout. And when you look at the post online, I covered my load at 11:30 at night on a Friday, or I'm doing this on Sunday because a truck bounced. Well, is that freight that you're taking on a Saturday worth it? Is that freight that you're loading at 11:30 at night worth it? Because so much of the freight out there that loads at non-traditional hours are from really large organizations that want you to run at very low margins. So are you getting back what you're putting in? Another huge, I think, obstacle out there is so many brokerages are locating in very high cost of living areas. So you want to put that fancy building in a downtown place, and somebody starts right out of college, they have stars in their eyes, and I'm going to make it. Well, behind the scenes, they've got 4 roommates living in a tiny apartment, and 2 years later, if they want to get their own place, maybe they meet somebody, they can't afford to get their own place unless they're in that top 5 or 10%, or they have a significant other that's making a lot of money. So some of these downtown places where you're trying to draw everybody in, the cost of living just makes it unsustainable for the average employee. And when we look at who gets the work done, it's everybody. It's not just your top 10% of employees that get the work done. It's your person that's going to come in, day out, cover their loads. And you've got to create an environment to where that person that's going to do their job every day and crush it can be successful for you. So that, to me, that's a really big one. Also, short-term philosophy. So many companies are managing to the quarter or to the latest market trend. You have to look long-term. And there's always new tech and new buzzwords that are always going to change everything. But if you take a step back and look at, hey, let's build for 2 years down the road, let's build for 5, or shoot, let's even build for next year. That's an area that I think a lot of corporations really struggle with. And then the last one is mixed messaging. So you get new initiatives that come out all the time, and they tell everybody, hey, we're going this way, and different things are aligned to get the masses to go a particular way. But why? What's really behind the reason everybody's charging in that manner? And I truly believe if there was more communication on what the actual end game is for the strategy, employees would feel that the corporation was being more honest. So we are extremely transparent with everybody on our team. We've been through a ton of change in brokerage, relaunching in 2023. Brokerage started a pile in 2012. So we had a group of team members that had completely adapted to a brand new strategy, and their roles were changed, but they knew the why. We over-communicated everything in advance, and ultimately we were able to successfully transition, and everybody's a lot better off for it because of the transparency.
I think you bring up 2 really great points. And the first one is that cost of living. That cost of living is a very real thing. And looking at you, Chicago and Atlanta, it's not cheap. And if you do find a cheap place, okay, well, then it's going to take you 45 minutes to go into the office every day. And that's I've done that drive before and it's miserable. I hated it. And I 0 out of 10 recommend. So I do love that that's something that you guys obviously took into consideration. And obviously, if you already are a brokerage and you have an office set up in Chicago, there's nothing that you can you can't just say oh, I'm going to move my 3-floor office out of here and because I have this fancy office building. But there are other things that you can do. And whether that's, you might not be able to give giant raises, but you can say hey, if you're going to be stuck in the car for 45 minutes, let's hook you up with an audiobook subscription, or let's do other things to make it better. Maybe we can turn a conference room into a small gym so you could get a walk or workout in at lunch or something like that. Some of those other amenities that make up for the fact that sometimes, you do have to drive a while. It's just little things like that. But also one of the other things that you mentioned was getting that buy-in and kind of over-explaining why. I think that's something that is sorely lacking in the brokerage space, because you have all these people that are oh, I read this book, so I want to do this management and this management thing, which is great. And I love the initiative there, but you can't just roll something out and expect people to just automatically be on board. You got to tell them why. You got to say, this is why we're doing this. This is what we expect you to be able to get out of it. Because ultimately that's the best way to get people to buy in, is what are they going to get out of it? Because if it's just to go along with some crazy harebrained scheme you read about in a book, that's not it. That's not it.
Absolutely. Another thing that we've done is looking at the hours we work. So many companies are standard 8 to 5 or 7:30 to 5. We give our brokers the option of you can work 8 to 4:30 with a 30-minute lunch break, or 8 to 5. And most everybody chooses 8 to 4:30. So they get the benefit of hitting the road to go home a little bit earlier than everybody else. Our benefit is there's a lot more people asking for quotes. There's a lot more trucks that are being booked between the hours of noon and 1 than there are at 4:30. So that's an example of something that 20 years ago in brokerage, what do you mean you're going to leave at 4:30? People would think you're crazy. But we're actually taking advantage of the time. And I will also say too, everybody's extremely committed. So, if somebody gets an email on the way home, they're not going to let it sit until the next day. But we try to give everybody a little bit more freedom in those particular areas.
And that's got to be really nice to know that I can go take a lunch and my stuff's not going to get stolen out from under me or other things like that. And I really like that that's something that you guys have kind of given people back their schedules and their free time. That being said, we are coming to the end. And Craig, you've been on the show before, so we already know where you stand on hot dogs and sandwiches. So it is time for you to present us with your best dad joke.
I actually have 2. This guy named Marty had a DeLorean. He'd drive it from time to time.
I like that one. That's a really good one.
And then one that my wife gave me, what do you call twin vampire baby boys?
Twin vampire baby boys.
Blood brothers.
There you go. I was going to say bloodsuckers or something. I like that one. Blood brothers. That's just in time for Halloween too.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Craig, if someone has any other questions for you about, ways to kind of help employee retention, or if they have any good dad jokes they want to share with you, where can they find you outside the show?
They can email me at clau@edeweypile.com or message me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Mary.
Find Check Call the Podcast anywhere you get podcasts like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And don't forget to check out all the other incredible FreightWaves shows. And don't forget to subscribe to Check Call the newsletter on freightwaves.com/checkcall. See you on the internet.